Hello and welcome to Narrowcast Boxing. It's January 31st, 2019. Let's start off with the fights from last week. The first one being Jamie Munguia defeats Takeshi Inoue by 12-round unanimous decision to defend his 154-pound championship. Two of the judges had it 120 to 108, and the other one had it 119 to 109. I felt these scorecards were way too wide. I scored the fight 118 to 112. I believe I had 2 rounds even, which is pretty unusual for me. I don't think I've ever had that before, but it was a very competitive fight, but I did think that Munguia had the better work of the two. On my scorecard, I noted that 4 of the rounds were close, in my opinion. For one of the judges to give Inoue only 1 round and the other 2 not giving him any kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I definitely thought he won at least a couple of rounds. No, it's not uncommon for there to be bad or suspicious judging in boxing, but lately to me it seems like the number of poor scorecards have increased. Maybe it's just my perception, but I do feel like a lot of high-profile fights have had questionable judging, and some of the judging has just been downright awful in my opinion. I believe that the fight between Jesus Rojas and Kanzu was also controversial, but I didn't watch that fight or cover it, but that's just what I heard. But I'll touch on some questionable judging later in the podcast here, but as far as this fight went, it was very entertaining from start to finish. I think that Munguia threw close to 1,000 punches, with many of them landing, and Inoue showed tremendous toughness. He just basically walked forward the entire night. In round 10, Munguia finally managed to hurt Inoue visibly, but it was at the end of the round, and Inoue came back for more in the 11th and the 12th. Overall, I think it was a decent performance from Munguia. He was definitely looking to box from the opening bell and stuck to the plan throughout the fight. I was expecting him to be more on the front foot, but I'm guessing that he and his team wanted to move him from more of a brawler into more of a boxer. As I said last week, I think he's still very raw, and this fight kind of showed me more of that. I do like his fight style. I didn't really care for him boxing though. I kind of like when he sticks to his strengths and kind of come forward and throw power shots, but I do hope that he continues to improve. He may have overstated his power last week, but I do think highly of it, and he was definitely landing some brutal punches, especially the left hook to the body. I do think that the title he holds is kind of a blessing and a curse, because I don't see him beating the other champions in the division at the moment. I think he's only 22 years old, so there's really no rush, and I believe it was announced that he's going to be fighting again in April. So we'll see what kind of opponent he gets for that date. The second fight, which I mentioned last week, was the return of Keith Thurman. He won a majority decision over Josesito Lopez. The judges had it 117 to 109, 115 to 111, and 113 to 113, a draw. I scored the fight wide for Thurman. I had it 118 to 109. I only gave Lopez 2 rounds. I don't think that the scores of 117 to 109 or 115 to 111 are bad scores. I think they're very reasonable. But 113, 113 a draw, I just feel is completely ridiculous. The fight was competitive, but it wasn't really close, similar to the Munguia fight. One fighter was definitely doing the better work round after round, and in this case it was Keith Thurman. I just felt like he was a step ahead of Lopez the entire fight. He was clearly outboxing Lopez, and one thing that I'm tired of in boxing is the notion that if you're on the back foot you're losing the fight, or you're somehow running and not winning. Aggression without effectiveness really means nothing if you're landing the lesser of the punches. But as long as you're moving forward while doing it, some judges just see that and will give you rounds based on that alone. I really don't know how somebody could watch this fight and say that it was a draw. As far as Keith Thurman's performance, I thought it was good overall, but there were some major concerns. The main one being round 7, where he looked like he was in serious trouble. He was getting caught with clean, hard punches, and I thought he did well to survive. He was close to going down at the very least, and if he had gotten hit with more punches, I think that there was a possibility of him getting stopped. I also thought his stamina in the second half of the fight didn't look like it was all there. I do think that the 22 months out of the ring did Thurman no favors in this fight, but it's tough to figure out how much of an impact that had on him exactly. Thurman has been hurt before in his fight with Louis Collazo, and Thurman does have some flaws as a fighter in my opinion. I don't think that his strengths involve fighting in close or off the ropes, or fighting in a clinch. I don't think he's someone who is really comfortable engaging a clinch. He seems to use his legs for this purpose, and I think it got him in some trouble here. But in the post-fight interview, Thurman called out Manny Pacquiao, and I actually think that this would be a good fight to make at this point. Both of them are coming off of wins. Thurman is trying to reestablish himself, and I believe they're both now with premier boxing champions. So I definitely think it's a logical fight to make. If it did happen, though, I would be picking Thurman to win. As far as the fights this weekend, there's really only one that I'm interested in watching. That's the rematch between Eleider Alvarez and Sergey Kovalev. In the first fight, Alvarez won by a surprising and brutal knockout. I personally expect Alvarez to win this rematch, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same outcome, stoppage victory for Alvarez. Assuming Alvarez comes in as focused and as hungry as he did in the first fight, I don't think that Kovalev has the reflexes, the punch resistance, or if the rumors are to be believed, the discipline outside of the ring to overcome Alvarez. I should also mention his stamina. In the second half of most fights, he tends to fade. We saw that in the Andre Ward fights. But I was very surprised when Kovalev and his team decided to take this rematch. He got put down 3 times in the first fight and was stopped in less than 7 rounds. I don't know why you would put him back in against somebody who did that to him so soon afterwards. My thought is it may just be a cash out at this point for Kovalev, but I do give him some chance. I do think that if he can box and not really get caught in exchanges, he does have a chance to outbox Alvarez, but it's going to be a tall order for sure. But anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you for listening, and feel free to leave a comment or a rating, either positive or negative, whichever you prefer. Enjoy the fights, whichever ones you decide to watch this weekend, and I will talk to you next week.